they are heading towards the cliff, and it's not their fault, but they are heading towards the cliff really fast. I think that cliff is, for everybody, is within a year or two or less.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And who exactly is heading for that cliff? Well, it's not just newspapers this time, it is the whole shebang. According to former Sydney Morning Herald editor Eric Beecher, who's now a digital publisher, digital news sites are also struggling to survive, and public interest journalism is at risk. So tonight, we're bringing you a special edition of Media Watch because the future of news has never looked bleaker. In the past 7 months, even the stars of the internet have suffered, with Vice, Salon, Mashable and Gawker all laying off staff. BuzzFeed's been forced to cut its 2016 revenue forecast by half, or $250 million, and the famous digital tech site GigaOM was last year forced to shut down operations completely. So, what on earth is going on? Well, it's getting harder and harder for news sites to sell ads for decent money, because, as Eric Beecher knows from personal experience, and I should disclose I have a small stake in his media business, everyone on the internet has an electronic billboard to fill.
What that means is, for the first time in history, advertisers aren't dealing with scarcity, they're dealing with ubiquity. And so therefore, the price they pay for advertising, the ability to target audiences in a way they never could before at low prices, is just creating chaos to the revenue model.
It's long been clear that digital news is not as profitable as newspapers and cannot save them from going off that cliff. The Guardian, for example, lost £59 million last year and is now laying off 250 staff, even though it attracts 42 million visitors a month to its UK, US and Australian digital news sites and is in the world's top 10. The Daily Mail, which gets 53 million digital readers a month, is also struggling. But even pure digital sites that once made money are in trouble because the revenue they get from advertisers for every 1,000 clicks on their website, or CPMs, has crashed. Alan Kohler, who started Business Spectator 9 years ago and eventually sold it for $30 million, says his site could not survive today.
We were getting $50 CPMs, which is per 1,000. And when we started the business in 2007, the view was that that was pretty good. We could just about make a living at that sort of price. And in fact, it's collapsed. The price has collapsed. And now the going rate for CPMs is $2 to $5. So it's really fallen to a tenth. It's one of the greatest price collapses in history, really.
The problem for digital publishers is that when it comes to ads, they are no longer the only fish in the pond, as Nine's Alex Parsons explains.
5 to 10 years ago, if you wanted to buy digital advertising in Australia, you went to one of 5 places. Nine, Fairfax, News Limited, Yahoo 7 or Telstra took up 80% of the display ad market. What we've seen over the past 5 years is the emergence of Facebook and other global players.
In the US, Facebook and Google now suck up 75 cents of every new dollar going to digital. And in Australia, the figures are even starker. Last year, according to Morgan Stanley, Google and Facebook's digital ad revenues in Australia grew by $1 billion. But everybody else saw digital revenue shrink by $700 million. And Eric Beecher can only see things getting worse.
Facebook as an advertising platform is extremely recent, and so they're on this extraordinary upwards trajectory, and they're grabbing revenue at a prodigious rate from traditional media. And they have the biggest media audience in the history of the world to support that.
The key reason that Facebook is so successful in selling to advertisers is that it can target potential buyers of their products because it knows who they are.
Facebook are just the champions of data because they have got everybody not only using Facebook, but they reveal everything about themselves. We all kind of put our entire lives on Facebook. So Facebook knows everything about everybody. I mean, you can target your advertising through Facebook to the individual. I mean, nobody's been able to do that before. It's incredible.
And not only is Facebook sucking up more and more advertising revenue, it's also how more and more people access their news. In the US, almost 9 out of 10 millennials, people born after 1980, already get their news this way. So, it's no surprise that GigaOM's founder Om Malik says if he was starting out today, he'd probably make his website a Facebook page. And this shift to Facebook is likely to accelerate now that Instant Articles is feeding stories from the Sydney Morning Herald or National Geographic, for example, direct to your Facebook app. Says Matt Rowley.
Facebook might look like a monster now, but I think it's just going to get bigger the more Instant Articles takes off.
With Instant Articles, those news stories look better and load faster, and users never have to leave their Facebook app. But while that's good for consumers, it sets publishers a problem. If they don't let Facebook have their stories, they miss out on traffic. But if they do, they risk making Facebook even stronger. So far, sites like BuzzFeed, The Washington Post, The Guardian and Huffington Post have all taken the plunge, as has Fairfax Media in Australia. But News Corp has stayed out of Instant Articles, saying it does not want to give its valuable journalism away. And media analyst Megan Brownlow says it's hard to know which is the right decision.
We've got more than 12 million Australians on Facebook every day, and they're tuning in 6 times a day. And then if they find an article that's from your publication or from your show, off they go to see it. So on that hand, it's very attractive. You need that. But on the other hand, you're fighting for the same money.
And news sites' problems don't stop there. In Europe, the mobile phone carrier 3 begins trialling technology this week to block ads from being transmitted over its network. And if no one can see those ads, news sites will obviously not be able to sell them. The technology, which blocks up to 95% of browser ads, could soon come here. And as Nick Newman of the Reuters Institute tells MediaWatch, it could have a dramatic effect.
I think if mobile phone companies block ads at a network level, then that's a real game changer.
Crucially, ads on Facebook won't be blocked. But it doesn't need to be done at network level. In the US, 1 in 3 adults are already using ad-blocking software that's achieving a similar result.
One of the problems with ad blocking is that once people download the ad blockers, our data suggests they never actually go back. So most of the people who've downloaded them are actually using them regularly, and young people who advertisers desperately need to reach are also ad blocking at very, very high rates.
Already, some US websites are reportedly losing up to 40% of their ad revenue. And it's estimated that in 2015, the US ad market took a $22 billion hit. Australia's yet to feel the full force. But SBS has moved to stop people with ad blockers accessing its videos, while The Guardian and 9MSN have trialled pop-ups to persuade viewers they cannot block ads if content is to remain free. But media consultant Steve Allen reckons news sites need to do more.
If they don't act on it quickly, it could become a serious problem down the track. The magazine and newspaper sites are the ones under the most pressure, and they can't afford to have this interference in what are already shrinking profits.
So, with all these problems, can news sites find a way to stay solvent? Well, one obvious way is to make readers pay for what they read, as News Corp does with its paywalls. And writing in The Australian recently, the paper's former editor-in-chief Chris Mitchell was optimistic that their strategy is working.
When the paywall was launched at the Oz 3 years ago, subscriptions were $3 a week. That is now $8. Growth is not slowing, and actual total subs are now more than 80,000. And that tells this old newspaper editor there is a reason to think paywalls can help save the news media model.
But the crucial word there is help, because independent analysts like Megan Brownlow from PricewaterhouseCoopers don't see subscriptions alone being the saviour.
You need a number of different revenue streams. On its own, it's not going to offset the loss of revenue from print circulation, but alongside a number of other activities, I think it's quite critical. Subscriptions are hard because Australians, particularly for digital content, are very reluctant to pay.
Yes, Australians are happy to spend $80 a month on a mobile data plan, but an Essential poll late last year showed that 7 out of 10 won't pay for news under any circumstances. Yet the Australian's publisher Nicholas Gray sees hope even in that.
I reckon 27% of people over 18 saying they might pay for digital news, provided there is something unique about it, which by my maths is 4.4 million people, is pretty good. And that number will grow.
But is Gray being too optimistic? Nick Newman of the Reuters Institute is afraid he may be.
I think for general news providers who don't have anything truly distinctive, it's going to be really hard to get people to pay for news when there is so much free news available from the BBC, from the Huffington Post, from a range of other providers. So it's really important to have something that's different and distinctive if you're going to try and charge for news.
Britain's Financial Times does have something unique to sell, and it currently boasts more than 500,000 digital subscribers, paying up to $15 a week. But the FT has been recently forced to lower its paywall and cut costs and staff numbers after a leaked memo warned of daunting trading conditions for 2016. And life's even tougher for sites that sell commoditised news, which is the sort you can get almost anywhere, including from the ABC.
The trouble with subscriptions is, that there's just so much free stuff still available that getting people to pay for content that's basically the same as what you can get for free is never going to work. I mean, it's got to be very special to get people to pay, and even then, you're going to be struggling to get the same number of people paying the same amount they used to pay for a newspaper. That's really the problem.
Britain's most popular tabloid, The Sun, owned by News Corp, put up a paywall in 2013, but was forced to take it down 2 years later. Australia's tabloids, which are also largely owned by News Corp, don't reveal their subscriber numbers, apart from the Herald Sun. But paywalls are unlikely to work well for them either. And while Fairfax papers are doing better, they're not raising enough money to stop repeated job cuts. The Sydney Morning Herald and The Age have much higher digital subscriptions than the Australian, but numbers are now falling, and both still rely on print advertising and print sales, which are declining fast, for more than half their revenue. So how can they or anyone fund their news operations in future? The answer is, nobody really knows.
I think there's no single answer. Essentially, most media companies are thinking about a range of business models. They can no longer afford to rely purely on digital advertising. That's clear. I think traditional media is definitely in the midst of this perfect storm because of the combination of ad blocking, falling print sales, and just the difficulties of funding news in a more atomized world. And in the short term, the prospects look pretty serious. But I suppose the positive side is that people are still really interested in news. They're interested in all kinds of news. So it's not the demand, it's the business models that's the problem.
Philanthropy, crowdfunding, micropayments and native advertising are just some of the business models the media are trying. But the key problem is general news costs a fortune to produce, and it attracts very little digital advertising because general news doesn't directly target the people who are looking for that new car, home loan or holiday that advertisers want to sell. But Nine's Alex Parsons insists that general news is still something mainstream sites have to produce.
It's not as profitable as the lifestyle or automotive categories, but what it does do is create habit for consumers to visit your site, who can then move into other categories which are more lucrative for advertisers.
But many in the advertising world are not convinced. And Lachlan Bray from analytics company Comscore believes general news has no future, telling MediaWatch that for media companies the answer is simple.
They should stop making general news. They need to change and adapt. It's inevitable.
So what does all this mean for mastheads like the Sydney Morning Herald, the Australian, the Herald Sun or other commercially funded news sites? Eric Beecher, who's edited 2 of those 3 papers in his career, is not optimistic.
They are heading towards the cliff, and it's not their fault, but they are heading towards the cliff really fast.
And if they go over the edge, what exactly goes with them? Reporters' jobs by the score for a start. But Eric Beecher also believes it will bring the, quote, collapse of civic journalism.
And when I say the collapse of civic journalism, it's happening all the time. You read all the time about journalism companies like Fairfax and News and so on carving back the resources, making journalists redundant, and particularly in the areas that matter to the democracy, so covering politics, covering the courts, covering science, covering technology, covering education, covering the arts. All of those things, covering business, these are so fundamental to the way our democracy works. And the resources to do that are being stripped away every day.
That is a gloomy view, and it's certainly not shared by News Corp or Fairfax Media, both of whom declined to take part in this programme, but who declare themselves to be optimistic and excited about the future. But it is shared by Nick Newman of the Reuters Institute and many others we've talked to. So, what about Alan Kohler? Gazing into his crystal ball, how optimistic is he?
Not optimistic at all. I think that, I think that sort of what you might call public interest journalism is going to be funded by public interest bodies such as the government or philanthropists. or other people say like that, but I think that there's no commercial future for that at all.
Eric Beecher is equally convinced that taxpayers may ultimately have to fork out to more than just the ABC and SBS to keep public interest journalism alive.
I'm talking about something like government funding in a way that the courts are funded. So they are 100% independent of government, but they are funded by government. I see that unless that happens in Australia, we're going to wake up in a year or 2 years' time and find that half to two-thirds of the important journalism that kept power accountable won't exist. And half of that half doesn't exist now.
That seems like an extraordinary idea and a shocking one. And we're not sure we can see it getting much traction. But the revenue crisis now hitting traditional and online news media is very real. So, what's the answer? Well, this program has said it before, and we'll say it again. If people refuse to pay for the news they want and for the scrutiny that society needs, then sooner or later they'll find that it's gone. There's probably close to 1 million people watching this program, so if you care about it, you can help. Put your hand in your pocket and stop it from happening before the media get to that cliff. Buy a subscription. Think before using ad blockers. Don't kill the media that you need. And you can read more about tonight's special on our Facebook page or our website, where you can get a transcript and download the program. You can also read statements from Fairfax and News Corp, and you can catch up with us on iView and contact me or MediaWatch on Twitter. But for now, until next week, that's all from us. Goodbye.